Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network. Every 2 weeks, me and Dallas look at two films from the A24 filmography, and in between, we're lucky enough to speak with the talent involved in bringing their films to the big screen. This week, I'm joined by director Kyle Newman to discuss his A24 feature, Barely Lethal. Starring Hailee Steinfeld as Megan Walsh, who has been training to become an international assassin. However, when she's on a mission, she notices how every other teenager her age seems to be having fun and enjoying their lives. Desiring a normal life, she bails out on a mission and enrolls in a student exchange program, while in the process of being adopted by a foster family. Kyle discusses how he got his break into the industry, the challenges and rewarding experience of filming Star Wars comedy Fanboys, his work on Barely Lethal, and the experience working on the coming-of-age A24 action drama, and creating music videos for Lana Del Rey and Taylor Swift, and much, much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks to Kyle for joining us. Obviously, Kyle, you're such a diverse creative talent. You've worked in features, shorts, animation, music videos. What inspired your journey to become such a creative talent?
Well, I would say I developed an affinity for filmmaking at a younger age, not realizing it was an actual career. I was a huge fan of Lucasfilm and a lot of things George was creating, his collaborations with Spielberg. It really got me keyed into special effects, the behind-the-scenes aspects of the craft. I was trained more as a fine artist, though, as a painter, and I just had an interest in other mediums. So I didn't just want to sit behind a desk or an easel and do things. I wanted to connect with people, collaborate. I love photography. I love design. I love theater and performance. I love, architecture, all these things. And it all kind of coalesces into what is this catch-all modern art filmmaking. So I just love the spirit of working with someone, bringing out the best in them, finding where you are deficient and collaborating with somebody to bring that out in you or to look at something in a new way. And those are all the things that filmmaking yields. So when I was a teenager, maybe 12, 13, I started to say, I want to be a director. I grew up in New Jersey, so it was a little abstract. I wasn't in the Hollywood area. I didn't really have access to a lot of those things. So it was all very foreign to me. So it just was learning about it at a distance. And I'd say when I was 15, 16, really focusing on going to film school and had my heart set on either NYU or USC. And I'd gotten into both, but I chose going to NYU because I had an older brother who been going through medical school and everything, and he'd been away for 10 years or so, but he was coming back. Well, he was based in New York at the time. I was like, well, I'll get to spend more time with my older brother. And then as soon as I got into film school at NYU and accepted, then he, of course, moved to Chicago. So, I was kind of building up towards going to NYU and applying myself to it, not knowing what film school would be like, but knowing that I was going to be among like-minded people. And hopefully it would galvanize a little community. So that was my entry into, I would say, professional training.
When did you sort of go from, say, graduation to your first feature, the 2004 film The Hollow?
Okay, so that's an interesting and crazy story. I'd written a few things for television. I'd done some short films. I'd done actually an animated documentary about an artist named Brian Alford that was out at Sundance, short format. I did study animation as well as film history, classics, different things that NYU I minored in as well. And I was pitching an animated project out in Los Angeles in, I guess it was 2003, and I was about to fly home. It was a Sunday, and a friend of mine called me. He's a screenwriter, and he'd written a few things like Man Thing, and my friend Mason Novick, turns out, was also producing this film. He went on to produce Juno and some other cool projects, and I knew they were up to something, but I didn't know what they were really filming or doing, and they called me desperately one morning, meet us at Starbucks immediately, and I was like, well, I'm supposed to fly home in a few hours. What's going on? Cancel your flight. Trust me. Meet me at Starbucks. So I meet them at Starbucks in La Cienega, and they present to me this idea of directing a movie. and it's a movie they're in production on, and it's a movie that I would need to go to set to that day. And it's a movie that just lost its director / financier. I had not read the script. I was largely unfamiliar with the project, but familiar with the mythology behind the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving tale. And it turns out they're making a modern day Sleepy Hollow called The Hollow. And, rather than going home to the East Coast and not working, I just had to, throw caution at the wind and get in this van. It was double parked on La Cienega Boulevard. I got in the van and they drove me to the Disney Ranch where they were shooting this movie called The Hollow. It had been cast. It was 4 days into production. The director, I guess, had a nervous breakdown and hopped in his car, drove up the coast to Vancouver, and said, "I'm done. Finish the movie if you guys want." It was a very low-budget movie. And I was like, whatever, I'll jump in. Let's do this. And I got to set, and it was, for lack of a better word, a shit show. Nobody wanted to be there. And I had immediately stepped into this Ed Wood type role where I had to convince everybody it was going to be great, even though I could see, the writing on the wall. There's just a lot of errors were made in pre-production. And if you don't make the right steps in pre-production or in your script, you're in trouble. And I learned more on that film, though, than probably anything I learned in school, because I was thrown into the fire. And you just become passionate about something, even if it's not yours, even though I didn't create it, write it, cast it, crew it. I had to become the most passionate person on set to rally everybody around finishing this film. There's a lot of things in it I am proud of, considering what we were up against. And, I enjoyed, working with them on the score, and also the credits, opening credits were cool. We got some Sound Guild nominations for it. It was a very small movie, under $400,000. But, as soon as I got to set, there was a headless horseman. It looked like he just purchased his costume off the rack at a costume store. It was brand new. And I was like, what is going on? So I took it and rubbed it through the dirt and started ripping it, and they thought I was crazy. But I was like, this guy just came out of a grave. He's 200 years old. Let's do this right. So you could just change the things you could. A lot of things were cemented in. Like if I wanted a certain filter, I was like, hey, how about a blue filter? Like, well, we only got these brown ones. So I'm like, all right, we'll go for a harvest look. You just have to roll with what they have. Roll with the gear. Roll with the cast. I had to figure out, why was this person cast? What were they looking for in this script that they thought this person would embody or bring out? And reverse engineer my passion for it. And it was still exhilarating. I mean, I got a pneumonia. It was exhausting. I personally lost a lot of money on something because I wasn't paid. It was a crazy process, but you know what? It was unforgettable and irreplaceable in terms of experience.
Was this sort of like a calling card for, say, Fanboys, which was to come a few years later? How did you sort of go from this movie, The Hollow, to something like Fanboys? What was the connection there?
It wasn't really a calling card. I don't really want to show it to you. I always said I'll do this movie if I can have a commentary so I can explain what's going on, because this obviously wasn't something I had any say in the true creation of narratively. I never got to do that, which was unfortunate, and I didn't show it to people at the time as a calling card, but at least people could say, oh, well, you finished a feature-length project. Regarding Fanboys, there was a producer named Matthew Paniciaro. He runs a great company called Bow and Arrow. And I think they put out Noble Sun recently, which had some A24 connection. Matt and I had known each other for a bit, and I knew of this script that he had acquired called Fanboys, which we both read about on Ain't It Cool News back in the day when I was in film school. And he had just moved out to Los Angeles, and he actually tracked down the script, optioned it, and heard I was a huge Star Wars fan, and brought it to me and asked if I had some interest in developing this. And of course I did. It initially had some issues, but the spirit behind it, the themes behind it, really stuck with me. And being a huge Star Wars fan, I took to the cause and said, we have to bring this to life. So I was working on that kind of in the background while I was struggling with this other film and finishing that. And just, things came together with that in terms of we had to get Kevin Spacey and his company on board, and he opened some key doors to Lucas to get those final approvals. We had a lot of interest in the script in town at various studios, but people were reticent to touch it because they didn't want to step on George's toes. And once we got George's approval, that he understood that we were making a movie that was poking fun at fans but not lambasting them. We wanted to love the franchise and showcase fans in a positive light and do justice to the community of people, because it's a really strong community of fandom, and it went through a very dark time where they weren't being serviced and people thought Star Wars was dead. And we wanted to capture a moment in time too, and it was an atypical period piece because we were making this thing in 2005, 2006, and we're making a period film about 1998. Normally you have more perspective and time between the era you're making the film and the period you're talking about. So it was a little strange because the project didn't begin as a period project. It just took a certain amount of years to get made. So it kind of came together through a collection of producers that all joined the cause, and gradually putting the cast together to the point where we felt like we had the right core group of guys. Dan Fogler had recently won a Tony for the Putnam County Spelling Bee, and I'd seen a headshot of Dan Fogler. I was like, I need this guy in the movie. He's my hutch. So it seems like people's careers built. So by the time we were ready to go make it, people like Dan his status had jumped, and he meant more to the project, helping us get it off the ground and greenlit. And it was an independent film, but the Weinstein Company had gotten involved and were going to give it theatrical release as best they could in that era, and they more or less left us to ourselves to go make it. They got more heavily involved in post-production when they felt like they could platform it into a larger, broader comedy at the expense of Star Wars fans, and that's where a lot of the conflict came from me and the producers with them. And it was an interesting process, that one, because we all stayed like a family, close together. The actors, the filmmakers, the producers were all very tight and unified in our vision for it, and just had to stick to our guns and kind of wait it out until they gave it back in some semblance familiar form that I could then reshape into what we intended in a very quick way. They gave me a 36-hour window basically to recut the movie that they had recut, tested, and it was tested worse than our versions by 10, 20 points. And finally gave it back and said, all right, go back to your version, but you have to work from our version. You couldn't just go revert back to your cuts, which were the ones that tested well. It was like this little tease or game. So I had to lock myself away for 36 hours with their editor and convince him why certain things needed to go back, at least to get the broad strokes of the emotional film we were trying to tell.
I mean, I remembered reading this story at the time, and I had so much respect for you as a filmmaker. You're still getting your spurs into this industry, and you've got people like the Weinsteins on one side, and the idea that they should remove this kind of the cancer plot line, which drives this movie, gives it the emotional core. And we've seen it as well. Sort of, I think it was The Force Awakens. A young individual with cancer got to see the film early. It was such an important thing. And the idea of removing it was absolutely baffling. And I can imagine filmmakers with less kind of attitude and belief in themselves could easily have went, oh, you know what, I'm going to fold here. We'll release the film. I'll take that. But you stood your ground, and I have so much respect for you for that.
Thank you. And it was personal to Ernie Klein, who was the original writer on it too, because his mother had died of cancer, and his fear why he wrote the film was, if he was in a position where he wouldn't get to see Star Wars before it came out, the mortality involved in being a lifelong fan of something and having like a fandom that stretches these generations, which is pretty uncommon. And Star Wars was one of the first big things to to do that. But it came from a very personal place for him, and we weren't about to throw the towel in and give up. Also because we had tested the movie. I screened the movie at Star Wars Celebration London to several thousand fans, and it got this insane ovation. And I videotaped it and I showed it to Harvey Weinstein, and he was great. He loved it. And we went to a screening in New Jersey, and he said, "This is the best experience I've had in a theater this year. I loved it." And the crowd was crazy. We got incredible numbers, but it seemed like internally at this company there were people that were angling to just go broader. Like I said, we had tried to make something that had some emotional qualities of Stand By Me, but it was still a comedy. And they ended up forcing us to put certain dance numbers and things into the movie, trading for days of shooting, and there was just much worse on the table. Ultimately, I was like, I'm not doing that. They reshot stuff while I was on my honeymoon during a writer's strike, illegally wrote a lot of it. It's crazy. I mean, the game plan they had too, and the people they brought in for consulting on it. There was a good oral history of Fanboys. If you Google it, kind of gets deep into it with some of the chorus of voices that were involved. But it's insane. But they started consulting Judd Apatow at the time, and Judd was like, "Cancer's not funny. Get rid of it." So they tried to clear the slate of Cancer, and he was basically clearing the slate so he had his Cancer comedy coming up, which he was prepping. So it was somewhat duplicitous why they were doing that, to advise that Cancer's not funny while you're secretly prepping your Cancer comedy was, I just thought it was, whatever. You're much bigger than this movie. What are you afraid of? Why are you doing that? But, Harvey trying to get into business with the Apatow company and Judd himself, went down these roads and always chased names and star power over, I felt like, what was best for the film. And I won't say it was easy, having your movie torn apart, having it publicly analyzed. It made it to the Drudge Report and really big news sites over here. And you're like, this is a $3.5 million independent movie. It doesn't really have that many problems. I mean, it's a flawed movie because we made it in 25 days, but and under the gun, but it didn't deserve that scrutiny or that lens on it. So it just got heaped with a lot of extra pressure and hype, which was unfortunate. And I think we kind of missed the right window to release it. And they defaulted on a lot of their release promises in terms of the number of screens. And at that point, they're like, what are you going to do? Sue us. So you just kind of have to roll with it. As much as you can stick to your guns creatively, there's a lot that's just out of your hands as a filmmaker, especially like a newer filmmaker.
One of the things that you touched on, and I imagine for all the challenges that you faced that must have been priceless, was getting the approval of someone like George Lucas. What was that like? And obviously you got someone like Carrie Fisher involved. Sadly, she's no longer with us. What's your memories and kind of experience of working with her as a collaborator?
Well, there was Billy D. Williams as well. It was just a lot of great people from Star Wars' legacy were involved in the movie. George initially giving us his approval, and then George coming to our aid near the finish line. And he said, I gave my approval for a PG-13 movie. I support Kyle's cut. I don't support your Frankenstein cuts. And you got the message wrong. It's a mean spirit. And that's not what Lucasfilm's going to approve. So he really had our back. And I think him being a filmmaker who went through heavy studio manipulation and all those games with his earlier films with CHX, and even, people wanting to disrupt what he was doing with American Graffiti. Thankfully, he had people like, Francis Ford Coppola having his back and picking up the movie and getting things out. So I think he empathized with what we were going through, and also he had something at stake in it because it was his IP, and it was talking about a fan community around his film. So that was amazing to have him have our back. He also let us shoot up at Skywalker Ranch. At that time, we were the only non-Lucasfilm production that wasn't like a docu crew coming in to shoot ever on Skywalker Ranch. So they were very welcoming. They included us in a lot of their, Star Wars convention presence. Like, we were part of the family for the next few years after that. So that was encouraging. Carrie Fisher was incredible. I had a wonderful 1-hour phone call with her before she flew down, and got really into her head about things and just how she felt about Star Wars and her relationship with the character and George, and how it's really defined her legacy. And she had fun with it. She embraced it, and she knew it was a lasting, enduring affiliation. It wasn't something she was ever going to get rid of, nor should she try, but she had fun at least talking about the way it helped and damaged her. And more and more we've seen it in her books as she's talked about stuff and in interviews, and she's gotten open about it. But that was just fun, getting like this personal glimpse into her and the way her mind worked. And she's really part of true Hollywood legacy. I think she's got such a unique voice too as a writer. And there was one point, there was 3 scenes, and she wanted to do more in the movie, and we quickly wrote up 3 options for her, and I knew which one she was going to pick. And she picked the one where Chris Marquette's character kissed her, and she kind of helped them on their way, kind of releasing them to go do what they needed to do, as opposed to being an impediment, which she was in the shooting draft. She was more like an obstacle than she was somebody who kind of gave them guidance and put them back on their way. So she really took to that, and Chris took to that, and that was a fun one to shoot, obviously, because she was an icon for him. And just having her on set, everyone was just wanted her to keep talking. So it was kind of lame when we had to roll cameras and she had to stop her stories. It was just like an endless flowing fountain of gems coming out of her. So, and it was great too. At the very end, I wanted to use this line where during that scene he says, "I love you," and there's the "I know," and it's her "I know" from Return of the Jedi. But we had to quickly get her approval. We were mixing the movie up at Skywalker Sound, and we had to track down the "I know" from the original sound recordings from the set of Return of the Jedi, shot in NorCal, and then quickly get George's approval. And he said, "I'm fine if Carrie's fine." And then she gave us that quick approval to use it, and all happened within less than 12 hours. The idea to getting that actual piece of old audio and slipping it into the movie. So that's her voice from Return of the Jedi saying "I know" in the movie, which is cool.
You've obviously I should ask as well, because I'm a Star Trek fan myself. If it came down to the two, that's the side I always fall down to Star Trek. What was it like working with the one and only William Shatner?
Awesome, and I love Star Trek too. It was hard. So William Shatner came to set, and larger than life, amazing. And he's like, "What's all this about a Star Wars Star Trek rivalry?" We're like, "What?" And he didn't think there was a rivalry. He's like, "Why are you trying to heat things up between these fans?" I'm like, "There's a rivalry. You don't know that? You don't see that?" And it was just funny. He really believed there wasn't that much of a rivalry. Not that there was animosity, but there's always that jostling back then. Before Harry Potter, before all these other franchises popped up, Star Wars and Star Trek were the space franchises, and they kind of traded dominance in cinema and culturally. And I just thought it was just part of common knowledge and pop culture. But he really thought that was funny that we were trying to elevate something that in his mind didn't totally exist. But he was awesome. I mean, he just came, shot. He wanted to just talk, take pictures of people. He loved the script. We didn't get a lot of time to sit and talk personally. Not as much time as I got to spend with Carrie or with Billy D. Williams, but we talked briefly over lunch, and I just like his spirit. He's like one of those guys. He likes to work. He's completely aware of how he's perceived and what his status is, and that he's always going to have in the back of everyone's mind, "Oh, that's Captain Kirk." It's hard to live down these iconic roles, and some people can endure past it, and it's very rare, and not that it's a bad thing. So I think he came, and he knew he was having fun with that point of view on him.
What I was thinking there when you were talking, I remember watching a video a few years ago where I don't know why I decided to go down memory lane, and I was watching like footage of people like Star Wars fans queuing up for Phantom Menace tickets, and bizarrely Star Trek fans went along to troll them, like these Star Wars fans in a queue, mocking them for liking Star Wars. I was thinking like this is 1999. The fact that Star Trek fans, after just seeing like Star Trek Insurrection, are trying to wind up Star Wars fans for queuing for the Phantom Menace was absolutely amusing to me and stuff. I just thought that takes a lot of balls to think, you know what, we're in a position of mockery here.
It was all done in fun, though. I mean, I was in some of those lines
Absolutely.
in New York City where I was living at the time, and Star Trek fans came by. It was like jeering and taunting, but it wasn't ever anything more negative than that. It was all done jovially. I think there was a positive spirit to fandom back then. It's a little more divided now. It's a little more supercharged. But back then I felt it was healthy rivalry.
Then obviously your next feature was Barely Lethal. When did you sort of get approached for Barely Lethal, and what made them think you were the director that they wanted to get involved in this?
My roommate was working at RKO at the time, and RKO had a large back catalog of movies that they were trying to revitalize. But at the same time, they were trying to do some new content, and he had targeted the script. And I took to the fish out of water comedy aspects of it. I loved the fact that it was trying to pay homage to a genre of films which wasn't getting made as much anymore at the time in Hollywood. It was a few years before. I think it was maybe 2011 or 12 was when I first got involved. It needed some work and some drafts. It was a really good starting place for the film conceptually, but in terms of the world and high school, we're trying to update things as much as possible and not just look back at the old 80s films, but also more recent entries into the genre. So that's why we tried to reference, 10 Things I Hate About You and Mean Girls, things like that. I wanted to broaden it beyond just the 80s stuff. But I wanted to make a movie for preteens, 10 to 12-year-olds. That was the goal. Unfortunately, a lot of people were like, well, this isn't Hannah. Why is this not like, they started to compare it to a lot more serious things. I think some of the trouble with the release of the film was it happened very late because A24 acquired it very late because the person who had kind of defaulted on their release wasn't signing the paperwork over to them. And it was really, the window was closing, and we only had 6 weeks until our theatrical, and only a few weeks before their DirecTV deal to get this film out. So they couldn't really pull the trigger completely on a lot of marketing things because they didn't fully own the movie. As much as they were involved and we were talking about it, they didn't officially have all the paperwork transferred over. And I think resultantly, DirecTV put out some of the initial marketing, and it made it look like just a B thriller, like a Bruce Willis kind of R-rated action movie. Even when we were testing it, sometimes they were using comps like The Bourne Supremacy and Ride Along and just R-rated buddy comedies or R-rated action movies. And the spirit of the movie wasn't supposed to be an action movie. It's there's the trope of an action world that she comes from, which was marginalized because of a lot of budgetary issues. It was supposed to be a much more robust opening, and I had to turn it into an animated thing and just trying to keep some semblance of this world she came from, at least play with it more. That's where it took the most hits in terms of the economics of the movie, because those were, each little set piece was expensive, and it was another world we had to build, whether it was the Middle East or, it was going to be something in Europe, and all those things kind of got cut, and I had to turn it into an animated thing, which was fine because the spirit of the movie was supposed to be younger. But because I think we couldn't get ahead of it, marketing, I won't say me because I had nothing to do with it, as much as I tried to salvage and advise. It just wasn't presented in the right way, this was a movie for younger boys and girls, preteens. It's not for 16, you're 17, you're already past it. It's a lighter PG-13 movie. And I even had to go battle the ratings board to get the PG-13. A lot of the stuff that that the movie references, there's stuff we reference from other movies, which they wanted to deem R. But I'm like, we're referencing an iconic PG-13 movie. This is a moment or a line from that, and you're calling mine R. But the movie it's referencing, it was fine to be PG-13. I mean, do you see the logic in this? So I had to present this whole thing on the spectrum of high school and teen movies, and the type of jokes and the type of terminology that they used, and go to bat. And I won unanimously with the board and got the PG-13 approval, which I thought was vital, because this movie in its DNA is not R in the slightest, and our intention was to make something younger fared. So it was it was a crazy process, but from the beginning, that's the kind of movie we wanted to make. And people came in and out of the process trying to either make us make an edgier movie, or cut some of the foundational action out of the film. So thankfully I got to kind of do some justice to it and allude to the world she came from, because I never feel like we got to do that properly. Also, it was kind of crazy. I mean, I had a $64,000 line item for visual effects, and here I was sitting on like 250 shots that needed to be completed. And there's nowhere in the world you're going to get that kind of rate. I mean, we had 200 shots alone in that car chase, plate shots, and nothing was kind of done efficiently. So there's a lot of waste. I was training my actress the morning of for action sequences, and she should have been down there a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance training, not on the day, cutting into my shoot time when I'm already having to treat her like a minor in a shoot schedule. So it was an atypical way of approaching a film that could have been handled much more efficiently. And I just saw the writing on the wall with a lot of these problems early on, but it just went on largely on deaf ears. And I think post-production then had to pay the price for that, because by the time those people started to catch up to the reality of the situation that we'd been kind of trying to enlighten them to, they couldn't believe it. I mean, they wanted me to shoot Hailee Steinfeld like she was an adult, yet she was still a teenager, and they wanted me to convince her to emancipate from her family so she could complete Barely Lethal. I'm like, this is not happening. She's very proud of going to school and her education, and that's why she's turned down a lot of other opportunities in Hollywood. So I have to respect that. There's no way in hell I'm going to go disrespect her and her family and say, we need you to shoot these type of hours, when all along I said she is a minor and this is what's going to compromise our schedule. So it also informed the way I could shoot the film. I largely had to do block shooting and shoot over her shoulder. So say Thomas Mann or Gabe Basso or Toby Sebastian had to, when they were interacting with her, they're interacting with a body double. So I couldn't do things in two shots, and as much as I wanted to, I couldn't let comedy play out within the frame. I had to manufacture a lot of the interactions, which was unfortunate because it dictates the style. So I'm still happy and proud of making it work despite all those complications, and I still love the spirit of all those actors and what they brought to it. Toby Sebastian, I know this is an A24 podcast, and his sister is Florence Pugh, from Midsommar.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a funny connection. I remember he long ago was talking about his sister being such a wonderful actress, and it was great to see her finally pop in a few things. So it was not an ideal scenario, but I really haven't been faced with any. There's no such thing as an ideal scenario, I think, when you're making a movie. But I would say in the 3 features I've completed, none of them have been remotely palatable. They've all been extremely challenging, and in the case of Barely Lethal, it didn't have to be that way, which was the most unfortunate thing, So I just tried to, let the things I could harness dictate the way the movie was made. So that's why it has a certain style and look to it, which was not exactly how I wanted to do it, but those things are just things you just kind of have to roll with once you're in production, and you end up with an actress you can use 3 hours out of the day. you know.
You've obviously brought together a great cast here. I mean, Hailee Steinfeld from this film has continued to go from strength to strength. It seemed that you had such a great eye for casting to get her, and then you have someone as well like Samuel Jackson, Sophie Turner. You know, you've
Yeah,
managed to really
thank you.
get
Yeah, well,
how important is
Haley,
casting
you
to
know,
you?
we couldn't. It was hard to. She'd only really done True Grit. She had Ender's Game coming up, and a lot of people didn't want me to cast her. They said, "I don't see it." She was last time we saw her. She looked like a 10-year-old. But Sam really wanted to work with her, and I wanted to work with her. So we just put faith in it. You know, Sophie, the same thing. She really hadn't done any modern roles with an American accent. She just done season 1 of Game of Thrones, and I had a phone call with her. And I just loved her energy and her commitment to trying to do something different and kind of branch out. She didn't have any fear about trying to play an American high school student, and I just knew she would go on to bigger things. You know, so I wanted to jump in on. I always do that. I like to cast people based on the trajectory, not where they're at. I feel that's stale. You know, same with Fanboys. You know, with a lot of the guys they cast. You know, Rogan hadn't really popped yet, and Jay Baruchel and Dan Fogler, trying to go ahead of the curve. And it's great to see them all doing extremely well now, especially Hailee, Sophie, Dove. They're really taking. And Thomas Mann is such a gifted actor too. It's great to see him doing all these wonderful things.
The film kind of really stands out when I watched it. It's like it really stands out from say some of the other A24 films in the respect that it feels like this larger than life action premise, but then it also you think, well, actually, it feels like it perfectly belongs within this filmography with this, you know, as you mentioned, this coming of age story of a young woman, and that's something that they tend to see and look for in their films. Was that a kind of mix that appealed to you as well, to be able to tell both an action story, but something, as you say, something so sweet too?
Yes, I wanted the movie to remain innocent. I wanted the movie to play to a younger crowd, and it's unfortunate maybe it didn't find that exact crowd. It's rare you see Sam Jackson interacting with a bunch of 7 or 8-year-olds, and it's rare you see him in anything that's this light, And he was just a joy around these an inspiration. A lot of these young actors, he really opened up to them. He'd really collaborate with them. He was ever present. He even gave us an extra day of shooting because he really loved what we were doing and the vibe of it all. And I knew we were never going to be able to do full justice to the action, and I knew that wasn't the point of the movie. The point was that's the world she came from. And I just needed enough to authenticate that. Unfortunately, like I said, all that stuff largely got cut. But you just want to know that this is the serious world she came from. This is why she's escaping, and this is how intense it can be. And then to be thrown into something that was so different and alien that you just can't really prepare for or study before you get there. So it was that contrast. And as soon as I heard A24 was interested, I mean, I'm a huge fan of A24. They're one of the few brands I think that actually curates impeccably, and they have an identity to them, in the way that very few other studios and distributors do. I feel like there's a lot of let's throw whatever's cool. It's at festivals this year. Let's collect some of them and throw it against the wall. But they actually have a very specific type of tone, and I was surprised that they were interested in the movie. And I flew out and I talked to the guys, and I was like, I thought it was a joke at first. I'm like, what? And they're like, no, we're trying to do different stuff. I mean, we can't only do one type of thing. We don't only want to do one type of thing. And this movie has a different energy to it, and it can do a different type of business for us. So I was excited about that. It was just unfortunate that the collaboration was truncated because we had such like a problematic financier who, couldn't fulfill his obligations as a distributor as well, but was also really difficult about passing the baton to them. And they had some awesome ideas on marketing and posters and things, but like I said, a lot of that stuff, it could only have surfaced by the time we were getting to streaming and home video and things, not in the initial release and collaboration, because there was just a lot of stuff. The assets just had to be carried over from what was previously developed. So I think because it was an A24 movie and it didn't have enough time for them to kind of position it in a way to say, no, this is something different. People just put it through the lens of, well, this doesn't feel like normal A24, so it's just a bad version of this. And while the movie's not perfect in any respects, I feel like, my issue was I just wish it had the platform to go out there so we could market it, so you could put the idea into people's head that, no, this is never intended to be Hannah. Hannah's Hannah. I like Hannah, but this is clearly not Hannah. There's a reason why we cast it, and has a certain tone to it and a certain style to it that's not these other movies that it invariably got associated and compared with. So it was a tricky it was a tricky process, but I feel like they did the best they could considering the window we had and what it was, and I kind of had to reintroduce Hailee to the world because she didn't have much else out there, and I think people are expecting Sam Jackson to be one way in a movie, and he's never cursing or having a certain intensity, which he does so well. So I think people bring some notions to the table and they're like, well, that's not what it's supposed to be. So that was unfortunate, and in this whole process. But it was good to play with genres and balance between them and try to balance really extreme tones that don't often go together.
The film sort of landed in sort of an interesting time as well. When you think of other films, sort of like Kick-Ass and Kingsman as well, which were also popular, but also kind of received backlash as well for sort of some of their female characters, for kind of language, action, and so on. What was it about this kind of time? Do you think sort of films like Kick-Ass, Kingsman, and Barely Lethal played sort of a role into getting towards some of the action and female-led films that we see today?
Absolutely. I think, Kick-Ass was such a bold and brave, subversive comic. And I think that character, Chloe Moretz's character, obviously is the one that really popped in that first film. I think Kingsman as well. I mean, they're very different. I mean, is Kingsman an R film? It is, right?
Was, yeah.
Yeah. I think they're. I mean, you can tell that they're trying to push some boundaries, obviously, and use the comedy as a buffer, to say more. And you can do that with comedy. Traditionally, you can push more buttons with comedy. Traditionally, you can comment more. We're obviously in an era now where even comedy has got limits, and there's stigma on certain things. And I think it's a sensitive. Things are being awoken, deep things that we need to talk about that are surfacing, and people are finding new parameters of what's okay in comedy and what's okay with how you use different genders and roles. And one thing I was proud of with this is no one was putting a gun to my head saying go make a female driven movie. No one's putting a gun to my head saying get female producers and female editors and female stars and have the females do all the action. That was just innately what the movie was, that we embraced and tried to go with. And I think it has like I like the energy. I like the way it represents females in our film. I don't. The men are kind of more marginalized in it, or off to the side, and they're bystanders in a lot of things. And I think those other movies are very important, despite some of the flack they got. Hit Girls is an iconic character. Is it going to push buttons? Absolutely. I mean, is she doing and saying absolutely inappropriate stuff? Yeah, and that's the point, And is that movie for 8 and 10-year-old girls? Well, hell no. That's for adults to look at it and judge that it's inappropriate. So no, she's not an icon for young girls. But I think if you try to put it into that mold and judge it against those standards, and you go, wow, this is wildly inappropriate. But I mean, that's not the intention, nor is it the intended audience. And, the rating justifiably serviced it,
The one thing as well we kind of touched on at the start is you're not just a feature filmmaker as well. You've also gone on and created music videos. And as a Lana Del Rey fan, it was when I was sort of reached out to you. I was like, I'd love to talk to you about Barely Lethal. And then obviously did a bit of digging. I was like, oh, there's this part of your career I didn't know about. How did you sort of get approached? How did you go from sort of these feature films to being able to do some music videos as well?
Well, I don't actively seek out the music videos. It's almost like an alternate, it's a full alternate world. It doesn't often overlap with narrative storytelling. I find them vocationally extremely different. In the same way I find commercials extremely different from videos and features. I was friends with Lana, and she was actually there when my firstborn. She was like the first person to sing to him in the hospital. And we were hanging out one day, and she said, I have to do a video in 3 days on this song, Summertime Sadness, before I go away to Germany. Do you have any ideas? And we just put something together incredibly fast and tried to... what I find unique about the video experiences I've had is it's from a close relationship with the artist, where I can get into their head, and just from knowing them, not that it's a psychoanalysis, but I know them. I know the way they tick. I know the way they think. I know what makes them excited. I know what they jive with, and I can hopefully present something that does justice to what I think they're trying to do with their music. And with that one, I was a fan of Lana from the first time I heard her, and we became friends. And she's, as much as she is this mysterious persona, she is all that, but she's also this like quiet, sweet, domesticated, humble and loving person, as much as she is this badass that is Lana Del Rey. And there's always something emotional with her music. It's pushing some boundaries, but it always has to have like an emotional quality or say something, but at the same time there's a softness to it, and it's has to be emotional. And that's why I love her music. If music doesn't hit me emotionally, I really don't have time for it in my life. Happy is not really an emotion to me. It's just it's a reaction. I like music that has a touch of melancholy or life to it, be it from like old Beatles or Smiths or whatever. It has to be saying something more than just happy. And her music has these deep textures to it. And so that's why I wanted the layers. I wanted to bring that to life and used 5 or 6 different formats, Bolex and 8mm, 16mm, RED cameras, iPhone cameras, all these different things, and we crafted something that was cryptic, but also hopefully was very tangible emotionally. As weird and as cryptic as it, what is really going on with the storyline with these 2 women? You just wanted to feel loss and loneliness and isolation, but you just want to feel alive, and that's really the goal with that one, with her. And we turned around pretty quickly and shot a lot of stuff just hanging out with her, my wife, just random things on my phone and stuff with her. We went to Eli Roth's house for his birthday party and shot some stuff there. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm filming a video for Lana." And he's like, "What?" All that stuff made it into the video, which is strange and cool. Taylor, I was actually living at Taylor Swift's house for a little bit. We were doing work on our house, and she was letting us stay there. And I was finishing Barely Lethal, and she kept asking me, when are you done? When are you done? And one day I was done. And I was like, I'm done. She's like, great, we're going to do a video. And I was like, well, what? And it just kind of came out of left field. And she's like, well, I'm going to, my manager's going to fly in. He's going to play you a track and sit with it as long as you like, think about it, and let's do this. And outside of him playing me the track, there's no interaction. There's no manager. There's no label. There's no bullshit AR people, anything. Nobody's involved except for, me and her, just like it was with Lana. And it's just getting into her head about what she wants. And she was a fan of my video for Lana. And I know a lot of Taylor stuff has she has such a connection with her fans, and there's such she's always on the pulse of now and cool. And I think she wanted to do something artier with this video. And it wasn't going to be the first video off of her album. But we knew it was going to be, one of the first few. And I wanted to do something different with her, because as much as I become familiar with the music, and I loved her as an artist and this dynamic, creative person who's literally willed her career into what it is. It's not like the machine did it. I mean, she's the architect of all these things. She makes all these decisions. I worked on her tour with her too, the 1989 tour. From its inception, first meetings, it's just her saying, I want this. This is the feeling I want here. It's going to turn to this here. This is here. She maps out every aspect from the smallest to the largest level of her career and how she's presented, which is impressive. And with this, I knew she wanted to do something more artistic and something atypical. And so it was sharing images, going back and forth with her, and trying to find vibes of things that we liked. And I don't want to do like a narrative, yet at the same time the video is obviously, it's called Style, and there is this association with Harry Style, and that necklace in the video is a necklace that he had given her. So there are those elements to it, but is it literally about that or that time in her life? No. But it's there if you want to read into those things. But I wanted the emotional residue from that time in her life, and from knowing her, what she went through, or how she felt about things, or in general, how she thinks and feels, and how she deals with loss or pain. Or I wanted to have those qualities be true. So both of those videos came from very the rare ability to be close to the artist and to tailor and author something that felt like it was more from their soul, as opposed to manufactured by labels and PR. Because I would just drive in a car with Taylor and just shoot stuff on a cell phone, while we should be shooting on a cell phone. And some of that stuff's, in the video. Like, I don't mind mixing formats, and I think the format of the music video format is abstract enough where you can have leeway to do those things. The final presentation is not on a giant screen. It's largely on a phone, or maybe on your 45 or 50-inch screen on your wall, or a laptop. It's not like a large format presentation. I think quality-wise, you can get away with a lot of things, and it's more about getting into the moment and finding little truths.
One of the things that kind of blew me away as I revisited these music videos this afternoon, just before this interview, and then when it popped up, it was like your Taylor Swift video had 605 million views, which just blew my mind, as a potential number. What's it like working on such a tentpole music video? Because it seems like Taylor Swift has sort of kind of gone to this other level where people treat her forthcoming music videos like they're these big events, like whether it's like a Star Wars, it's people are queuing up to watch the movie. What's the new music video going to be like? What's that like as a director to be involved in a project like that?
It was something I thought about after the fact. It's one of those things where I didn't let it affect me while we were collaborating or creating it. It was something I became more aware of too while we were doing stuff for her tour, which came after. But while we were doing it, it was very pure. It was one of the pure experiences I've had in collaboration, because filmmaking is not pure normally. You've got 200, 300 people that are going to come in and out of this process, and everyone's trying to move the paintbrush in a different direction. And you kind of have to be political and work with these people, and a lot of them are going to be there for a few years. And you're hoping you're not just bringing on people into the fold because of their talent, but you have to bring them on because of their personality and how they play nice. And so you have to look in that big picture. With this, I didn't think really as much about the anticipation or the platform. It just was like, what's going to make her happy, and what's going to be honest, and what is true to our goal here of making something that's more emotional and artful for her. Beyond that, once the build up, once we were a few weeks out and we started to, like, talk about teasing little things or little clips and stuff, then you realize, okay, the machine is taking over now, and it's gonna put it out there in a certain way, and it's gonna tease it to fans. And then you're like, okay, well, I mean, are they gonna like it? It is very different than everything she's ever done. You just put faith in what you created, and I knew we created something very special and unique for her that I don't think she's done again since. I love her videos. I mean, she's always got there's such a gloss to them, and there's such like they're just well accomplished. She's always working with cool people, so it was an honor to get to collaborate with her on that level. But I didn't actively think about it and say, oh, I have to cater to that audience in any way. If anything, I was like, well, we're just making this, and this is going to be part of her now, and that audience can catch up to this, as opposed to it ever being feared or awed by it. With the tour, we had to be a little bit more aware. I directed everything with her, where she's on screen in the 1989 tour. I shot almost all that stuff, and there's a video for Clean on the tour, which I did for her, and then all the stuff with her friends, which were the interstitials when she would step off stage to do wardrobe changes and things. There were these, it was like Haim and Cara Delevingne and Selena Gomez. All these different people came, and it was these fun little docu things about Taylor. So I shot those too. So just a lot of different stuff to build up the tour, but also she's always about being relatable, and she wants that connection with people. She wants people to feel close to her, and she genuinely really cares about her fans. So it's really trying to bring those elements, and then being aware: are we connecting in this way? Are we giving people something special to feel like they're understanding her, and having that relationship with her? And I think then you're more aware of it, because you're like, all right, now this could be an arena, 80,000 people, and now we're shooting stuff that's like insane aspect ratios that have to fit across, misshapen screens, or now suddenly it's got to fit into a little box over here. So you have to just shape things in different formats and be adaptable to the actual presentation, which is just not like, oh, you're just going to watch it on your phone. In that case, there's all types of stadiums they're going to be going into, and you're like, well, this one's got to be a 2-to-1 ratio. This is a 3.5-to-1 ratio. So your format changes, your design changes, and it's subtle, but you have to just consider all those things. And then you're talking about, how is this relating to those 80,000 people in a stadium in that moment? And that's when you're much more aware of the relationship to the audience, because you're really catering it specifically to that.
And finally, what's kind of next for yourself, Kyle? Is it more features, music, tours? You're a man for all seasons. What can people kind of look forward to from you next?
Wow. Okay. So I've got I had a book come out last year on the history of Dungeons and Dragons called Dungeons and Dragons: Art and Arcana, which is like looking at the storied history of the world's preeminent role-playing game. And we're doing some more stuff with Dungeons and Dragons in the near future. I have another book that's yet to be announced, that's coming out October of 2020. Got a board game developed that's coming out next October as well, which is exciting. Doing a docuseries. Doing a docuseries in the D&D space, and I'm doing another docu-series with Kevin Smith, which is going to be cool. And feature-wise, I'm writing some projects I've always wanted to write, things I've been sitting on for 15 years. People aren't going to bring me the most amazing projects. I get the projects that are like the alcoholic projects that need sponsors, that I have to go fix or try to fix. It's unfortunate, but I don't get brought perfect scripts. So either I have to write it myself, and that's what I'm doing right now. I'm writing things that I want to make, as opposed to taking on other people's projects, or I have to really rehab a project because it's got a good idea, but it's not ready to be made yet, and spend that time redeveloping something. So I've been trying to lean into my own ideas, my own IP, and spent the last few years doing that aside from these books. So I've got some very cool stuff in the works, stuff I'm just really passionate about. There's a smaller movie that I'm casting right now, which we'll probably shoot early next year. It's a very small drama. Relationship between a brother and a sister, a portrait of a family, and there's autism involved. It's very different, but it's a movie I've been sitting on for like 18 years that I'm like, now's the time. I finally got like the right cast for it, and that's coming together quickly. And it's just my tastes are all over the place. I love science fiction. I love period. I love drama. I do love comedy. I wouldn't say I only like comedy, even though it's what people tend to bring to me or want me to do. I was hoping like videos would expand the horizon on how people think of what I can do. But like I said, that's just it's like a strange word. I would have to lean into that world permanently to really push in that format in a way. It's just I don't have as many opportunities unless an artist brings me something and says, hey, I want to do this with you. Like, I'm not chasing it. So I don't know what's on the future with music videos, although I do love it because it's very liberating and often pure if it's the right if you're connecting with the right song. It would have to be music I like. But what's on the horizon? A lot of my own stuff and probably a lot of struggle. To be honest, I like to do things my own way.
And finally, we pose this to everyone that we get on the show. What some of the A24 films that stand out for you? Have you got any favorites of their filmography apart from Barely Lethal?
Oh boy, there's been so many. Let's see, Witch. I can't wait to see Lighthouse. I'm a huge fan of Robert Pattinson. I think that looks truly fantastic. Going down the list, man, since the beginning. I mean, Moonlight, Florida Project. What's so great about him is like you kind of can tell. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to cop to what they're doing, but you can kind of tell what's a genuine A24 film. Like, I love Under the Skin. I feel like that's one that's
it's my favorite one as well.
I mean, I love his films in general, but I could listen to that score over and over again. I thought Rover was badass. Again, it's not like you can't put your finger on exactly what it is, but it's even hard to describe. But it's almost distinctly A24. You're kind of like, of course. What else? I mean, back in the beginning, Spring Breakers was kind of like a really good Here We Are movie. This is kind of what we're about. Ex Machina was cool. I love that kind of intellectual sci-fi that's fused with just as much philosophy as it is tension. What else? Green Room. I went to college with that filmmaker, and so I've known him for a long time. So it's great to see him having this platform to kind of get his unique voice out there. It's just I look down their list. There's so many more I still have yet to see. Like I said, Lighthouse is I missed a screening of the other day, and I was really bummed because it's just one of those movies I know I'm going to love. I just know it. And obviously from the critical response, it seems like other people are too. But I don't know. I mean, I just dived into your podcast as well recently, which I think is awesome that you guys are kind of going back and going through all these films. And like I said, it's one of the few quote unquote brands that I love the way they curate. I love what they are about. So yeah, I'm excited. I know Barely Lethal also got a mug recently.
Yeah, it's on Netflix here in UK as well.
Well, I know you guys weren't a huge fan of the film, but I felt like it was an opportunity to come and kind of explain a little bit about the movie too. Mm-hmm. And I don't love it when films have to be explained, but not explaining it in a type of analysis, but just there's a reason why a movie's shot or it looks a certain way, and a lot of times it's not what people think. And I'm still very proud of the movie and the family we created making it, and it isn't like other movies, and yeah, it has problems, but it's distinctly its own thing, which I am actually proud of. But it is atypical, I would say, for the A24 catalog for sure.
Well, honestly, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been really fascinating to hear about your career, your experiences, and to kind of shed some light on Barely Lethal. It's one of these films, I think it's one of the overlooked ones of the filmography that, and it's great to hear from someone like yourself to talk about those experiences. And I think with it kind of popping up on Netflix here in the UK, for example, available in America, I think more people are going to find it or kind of do these sorts of watches where they're going to come across a film like that. So it's been really exciting to be able to have you on the show today, and thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, of course. Thank you.